this is the second webinar in our series on growing coffee without endosulfan. And just to give a little bit of background for some of you of where and how we collected these experiences, back in 2013, we went and interviewed 22 farms in 2 regions, Colombia and in Central America, El Salvador and Nicaragua. We deliberately chose regions with different coffee flowering and fruiting patterns because that really influences the biology of the coffee berry borer pest and therefore how you manage it. You can see that we visited a wide range of farm sizes, from small holdings right up to large estates. And all but one of the farms we interviewed are certified under one or more of the sustainability standards listed here, like fair trade or rainforest or UTZ. And this means that all those farmers have had several seasons at least, some of them almost up to 10 years now, of not being allowed to use endosulfan under those particular standards, because those standards have prohibited endosulfan amongst other pesticides. So therefore, farmers certified under those standards have had to develop effective alternative control methods, and that's what we were interested in finding out. You can see there the funders of this project, FAO, ICEAL Alliance, which are the sustainability standards, and also the Dutch Sustainable Coffee Programme. So it was a multi-partner project, which we also did with our colleagues in 4C Coffee. So I'd now like to share some points with you about using biopesticides as part of an IPM strategy, reinforcing some of the things that we saw in the video and raising some more points too. First of all, I cannot stress too much that the starting point for effective management of this pest are good cultural controls, field sanitation, the picking strategies that some of the people in the video mentioned. We discussed that in the first webinar of this series, so if you want to find out more about cultural controls, you can go and listen to the recording of that webinar and see the PowerPoint. And we found that most of the farmers we talked to are using at least 2 different IPM methods. So there is no magic bullet solution for this pest. There is no single simple replacement for endosulfan either. Today we're going to be talking about using biological control in the form of the fungus Beauveria bassiana, to give it its full scientific name. And as you saw, it can occur naturally in coffee groves, but we can also increase its levels by spraying Beauveria products, either commercial ones like the bottle in the photo here, or the semi-commercial products, which are packs of rice with spores, as produced, for example, by ProCafe in El Salvador that we saw in the video. So in our interviews, we asked farmers questions to help us assess the pros and cons of the different IPM methods that they reported in use. And obviously, effectiveness is one of the most important ones. What we learnt about Beauveria is that it can be useful as part of an integrated approach, but you cannot try and use it as a simple replacement on its own for endosulfan or indeed any other insecticide you'd use against a coffee berry borer. Also, you need to use it very carefully and at the right time, otherwise you won't get any effect from it. So you can see there the percentages of the farms that we interviewed in both regions who are using Beauveria products. The Colombian farmers we met are all buying the commercial products, while those in Central America were buying the semi-commercial rice and spores packs, either from their farmer cooperative in the case of Nicaragua, or in the case of El Salvador from the research institute ProCafe. Farmers all highlighted that you've got to carry out very good cultural controls too. And most had found that once you start making applications of Bovaria, you'll start getting higher background levels of the fungus in your grove. So that's all helping you increase that natural control level. How much does it cost is obviously the next question, and this varies quite a bit. Per litre, the commercial biopesticides in Colombia are more expensive than most insecticides, but not that much. However, you can't just consider cost in terms of per litre. It depends on your application strategy. And as we saw at Don Guillermo's farm in Colombia, he's only applying Bovaria to the ground under hotspot trees in the older plots. He's not putting it across the whole farm. So it's quite a targeted application and therefore affordable. In Central America, it's certainly true that the rice and spore packs that farmers there are buying are cheaper than commercial, fully commercial products in a bottle. And those work out as kind of similar costs to making one application of Endosulfan, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. Endosulfan has since been banned in Nicaragua, and we understand there is a decision to ban it in El Salvador, and hopefully that will come into being soon. What about labor time? Well, it's really no more labor intensive than applying any insecticide. And of course, for either using a biopesticide or an insecticide, to get it to work properly for this pest, you've got to spend time first on monitoring the population levels in each plot, and where these are at levels where you think you're going to need to take some action, you've then got to check where is the beetle position in the berry. Are they still just entering, in which case you can reach them with the biopesticide, but if they're already inside, right inside, then you're wasting your time and your money. Well, how easy is it to use? And I think it's fair to say that it is not a quick or an easy option or an option for a lazy farmer. As Don Guillermo explained, you need to understand how it works. You need to be patient. There certainly are some shelf life limitations for the semi-commercial rice with spores packs. However, these can be overcome with advice and care. Certainly, you need training and support and experience sharing so that farmers become confident in using it and understanding how it differs from using an ordinary insecticide. You're handling a living organism, so it's very important to learn how to protect the spores from the highest temperatures, from the solar rays. So generally, it's not a good idea to spray during the hours of the highest sunlight, unless your groves are very well shaded or it's a very cloudy day, or if you're using one of the commercial products, which many now incorporate a sunscreen blocking agent as well. Can you use Bovaria with fungicides applied for coffee diseases? Yes, you can. However, you really need to be careful. Probably best to take some advice, plan very carefully, and obviously many fungicides will kill the Bovaria spores. So what you need to try and do is maximize the distance, both in time and space, between applying the fungus and spraying the fungicides. Some other key points that we learned from listening to the farmers and the technical support staff in the organizations who helped us organize the visits. We heard of 3 very impressive experiences of large and medium farms in Colombia, where they have either greatly reduced or even eliminated insecticide use for this pest by changing to biopesticides with improved cultural controls. So that shows it is feasible technically and economically in the quite demanding, challenging situations of high pest pressure in Colombia. Don't try and use Bavaria as an emergency, a last-minute control tactic. You will not get it to work in that way. It's got to be planned. You need to be patient. You also need to think, how can you encourage the fungus to reproduce itself naturally in the groves, as well as when you're actually applying it as a product. The more you can do to enhance its natural reproduction cycle in the groves, the better you can get the natural control to work for you. That means thinking about your coffee grove management practices, which ones will help the fungus, which ones will hinder it. But how cost-effective Bavaria use will be and how well it's going to work on a particular farm is hugely variable and depends on lots of different biological, climate, and market factors. You can find out more in the project document mentioned there, which is hosted on the project website on the 4C website pages. But I think one of the conclusions that came out of our lesson learning workshop at the end of the project is we do need more research on farm to assess these different factors in terms of cost effectiveness under different situations, and particularly with changing climate and things like, the situation of the horrific levels of coffee rust disease in Central America at the moment. So there is a lot more to learn. So I'm going to finish now with some more general conclusions from our project. Firstly, the farmers we met have found that they can manage coffee berry borer without endosulfan perfectly feasibly. They've managed to achieve good control with a range of IPM alternatives across a wide range of farm sizes, different climates, different altitudes, different levels of the pest, different types of coffee growing systems, and irrespective of their level of education and their age. A second key point is that it's a myth that endosulfan alternatives are always more expensive. Farmers told us that they don't find IPM too costly. They also said that IPM can deliver other benefits, protecting workers' health, protecting wildlife, less pollution. It's certainly true that the semi-commercial Bavaria products are more affordable for smallholders, and there's been an important role of farmer support organizations in helping to make these products more available and accessible, providing also the necessary training and advice. And finally, this is all about implementing the Stockholm Convention in practice, phasing out endosulfan as one of the requirements of the convention. And there are countries which still have not banned endosulfan yet, who may be worried about the economic consequences for their coffee sector. But what we've learned is that very good and cost-effective alternatives are already being used by some farmers. So don't be afraid of banning it. Coffee farmers, with appropriate support, can cope with that, as well as gain benefits from that action. Implementing the Stockholm Convention is a responsibility for more than just governments. In the case of phasing out endosulfan, it's clearly important for the coffee sector to collaborate on things like training farmers, providing alternatives, providing an environment that is friendly for safer and more sustainable coffee. Also, the role of farmer support organizations like the Colombian Federation of Coffee Growers, the cooperatives in Nicaragua, the role of the standards like UDS and Fair Trade and others, and the role of coffee research institutes, all very important in not only helping stop use of endosulfan, but in replacing it with safer IPM methods. and not just replacing it with another chemical, but moving towards more ecologically based approaches. So this is the end of the webinar. On here you've got the links to the project web pages where you can download the videos, you can look at the farmer case studies, you can look at the detailed documents, including one on using Bovaria. And I will be taking part in the final webinar session in this series, which will be about trapping. That's going to be in a month's time. So I'd like to thank you for your interest. I'd like to thank also the project donors and collaborators who helped to make it possible. And particularly, I'd like to acknowledge all the farmers like Doña Maritza here in Nicaragua, who gave their time and shared their experiences with us. So